Honey shows up repeatedly in accounts of mummification practices, sometimes used to coat linen wrappings, sometimes packed directly around a body before burial. Nobody performing those rituals understood microbiology. They were not trying to disable bacterial enzymes or manipulate water activity. They were working from something closer to reputation. Honey had a reputation, built over centuries of observation, for refusing to rot, for refusing to host the small crawling and growing things that consumed almost everything else left out in the heat. If a substance could resist decay that thoroughly in the physical world, it seemed reasonable to ancient minds that it might carry some of that resistance into the realm of the dead as well. It was not science. It was pattern recognition applied with total seriousness, and in its own strange way, it was not wrong. Honey really was doing something almost nothing else in that tomb could do. Greek and Roman writers documented honey being mixed into wine, rubbed onto skin, and used as a base for early medicinal compounds, often for ailments involving open wounds, coughs, or digestive distress. None of these practices required an explanation to be adopted widely. They required only repetition and resolve. A wound treated with honey that healed faster than an untreated wound was, to any observer across any century, evidence enough. The mechanism could remain a total mystery for 2,000 years, and the practice would survive anyway, passed from healer to healer, culture to culture, long before anyone could describe what an enzyme was. Food. Historian Rachel Lawton has written about how pre-modern societies developed entire preservation systems, built around observed behavior rather than understood mechanism. Honey fits that pattern perfectly. Nobody in the ancient world knew what water activity was. Nobody had measured pH. Nobody had isolated an enzyme called glucose oxidase. But they knew, generation after generation, that honey did not go bad, and they built entire practices around that single unexplained fact. So here's the real question this video is actually asking. If honey can defy time itself, using nothing but chemistry it produces on its own, why does almost everything else in your kitchen behave the exact opposite way? The answer says more about biology than about honey. Most foods exist to be eaten quickly by design. A ripe piece of fruit wants to be eaten immediately, its sugars readily available, its water content high, because the plant that produced it is trying to spread its seeds through an animal's digestive system. Meat is mostly water and protein, an ideal habitat for the same microorganisms that are constantly floating through the air around you, looking for exactly that kind of environment. Milk exists to feed a newborn animal quickly, not to sit in a container for months. Nature did not design most food to last. It designed most food to be consumed, decompose, and cycle back into the ecosystem. Spoilage is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. Honey is the exception because bees needed something fundamentally different. They needed a fuel source that could survive an entire winter without a single day of maintenance, sealed inside a hive, sometimes for months without any bee even checking on it. Evolution solved that problem by making honey almost uninhabitable to anything except bees themselves, which have adapted to process it. The byproduct of solving a bee's storage problem was accidentally creating one of the only foods on Earth that essentially ignores the passage of time. This reframes something you have probably taken for granted your entire life. You have grown up assuming decay is inevitable, that everything in your fridge is on a countdown, that spoilage is simply what food does. And for almost every food you eat, that is true. But honey proves it was never a law of nature. It was a default setting that evolution built into most living things because decomposition serves a purpose, recycling nutrients back into ecosystems, feeding the next generation of organisms in line. Honey simply opted out of that system entirely, by accident, while solving a completely different problem. Look at it from another angle. Almost every food preservation method your ancestors invented was an attempt to fight against nature's default setting. Salting fought against water availability by force, dragging moisture out of meat through osmosis. Smoking fought against microorganisms by coating food in mildly toxic compounds. Fermentation fought back by recruiting an army of competing microbes to crowd out the dangerous ones. Every single one of these techniques was humanity intervening, deliberately, to override biology's natural preference for decay. Honey never needed any of that. It arrived already armed, its defenses built directly into its chemistry by a completely different organism, solving a completely different problem, and humans simply discovered they could borrow that solution for their own purposes.